Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for yet another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, take a look at the hazardous weather graphic, and got a winter weather advisory, or snow advisory, winter weather advisory for snow here for the eastern North Gulf Coast, Yakutat, and that's out until 6 p.m. and possibly as much total accumulation of 3 to 6 inches. I believe Yakutat only picked up about an inch during the day today. And there's a winter storm warning out here for, actually for Juneau, Douglas, Glacier Bay, and Pelican, Gustavus, Elfin Cove, and those areas. And that's out for tonight till 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, and that's for anywhere from 5 to 10 inches of snow to fall in these areas during the overnight hours tonight into until 6 a.m. tomorrow. And then winter weather advisory there for Hoonah, not expecting as much snow there, about 3 to 6 inches. And again, that's out until 6 a.m. Tuesday morning. Up north, Arctic coast, wind chill warning out for, until 6 a.m., or actually, I believe it's till 6 a.m. It's out for tonight anyway, and probably goes into part of tomorrow as well. And that's for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, looking for wind chills to continue in that 50 to 70 degree below zero range, with winds picking up a little bit tonight over what they were today, and a wind chill advisory out for the western Arctic coast here. And that's for the area, well, from 6 p.m. until noon tomorrow. For both of these zones, the warning again is a little shaky there on the timing, but it's from 6 for tonight until noon on Tuesday. West side here, 55 below zero wind chills until noon on Tuesday. Okay, moving on to satellite imagery. You can see a little system here, kind of tracking east-northeast along the North Gulf Coast. That's what brought the light snow into the eastern North Gulf Coast today, tapering off here back to the west. And really not a whole lot. Some clouds though did get in the Copper River Basin area there, and that's kind of sliding up to the northeast. Otherwise, southern southeast coast had some showery conditions in the form of rain or snow, with Metlakatla picking up about 0.12 of an inch of precipitation, liquid water equivalent, that fell both in the form as rain or snow, and elsewhere amounts were quite light. Clear cold temperatures again over the interior, well below zero this afternoon. Some areas, the North Slope, we had airfields been seeing it around 50 below zero since yesterday afternoon. Still sitting at 50 below at 3 p.m. this afternoon, and temperatures along the Arctic coast in the minus 40s, again with those winds, and you can see wind chills reach possibly as low as 70 degrees below zero. Otherwise, a little milder south of the Brooks Range there, with temperatures this afternoon in the in some case around, well, for Fairbanks, sitting at about 35 below at 3 p.m. and generally 35 to 40 below for the coldest locations. Below zero conditions all the way out to the southwest coast, and winds are much lighter here over the Bering Sea. Still a few snow showers out there scattered around, but none hit the Pribilofs, and a little bit more extensive snow showers occurred that brought about an inch to Cold Bay today. Otherwise, well below zero, Bristol Bay, King Salmon, Igagik up into the southwest interior. Kodiak, no precipitation, even some clearing, temperature in the lower 20s or so mid-afternoon. Next system coming into the far western Aleutians here, weakening as it pushes eastward, with the main low center hanging back to the west. where gale warnings were out today and tonight actually for the for the western and central Aleutian areas, the southwest Bering Sea. Precipitation not all that impressive, about 1/10 of an inch water equivalent there for AKwx, and temperatures warm enough now. That fell in the form of rain this afternoon. Started out as snow, but pretty light so far. And rolling that to today's analysis, there's a location on the front right about there. Of course, warmer air sliding and riding in on those east-southeast winds ahead of the front. So snow back towards Shemya and rain AKwx and Atka. A breakthrough here for the Pribilofs and Fox Islands. Weak trough, scattered snow showers that did bring about 1 inch of snow to Cold Bay today. Otherwise, Bering Sea not too bad. Some variable clouds with some clearing. Pretty nice along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coastal areas. Cold over the interior. You can see high pressure from northwest Canada all the way over to the Russian Far East. Cold Arctic high pressure. And then this low in the Gulf of Alaska bringing the light snow, mostly from western or eastern Prince William Sound eastward into the northern panhandle. And for tonight, you'll see the system down to the south stays to the south and rolls on east-northeastward. This low slowly tracks eastward, and again, that's going to bring the snow into the northern southeast coast tonight. Dry central and southern areas with some clearing. Isolated snow showers kind of passing by from west to east, clipping southern Kodiak Island, AKwx, Sitkinak, Trinity Islands, those areas. I don't think you'll get any up around Kodiak State Airport, and definitely not for Fognak Island. Isolated snow showers, Bristol Bay. This front, kind of a new low forms here on that front, and that'll increase some wind, small craft advisories with warming temperatures and transitioning precipitation here for the eastern Aleutians, pressing in toward Falls Pass toward morning. High pressure holds up here to the north, clear and cold once again, anywhere lows 35 to 55 below, and that also holds for tomorrow as well. Kind of a weak trough here dropping southeastward maybe bring some flurries and fog to the eastern Beaufort Sea coastal areas there. That's just a slight chance, otherwise don't look for any change. And the winds after picking up, in fact, this trough coming down is the reason the winds are going to kick up a little bit there for the wind chill warnings. And then after that pulls off, they should drop off again. You can see mostly clear skies southward through the interior all the way to Kodiak Island. Weak low pressure in the Gulf, as there usually is. Usually when you get cold air mass over the interior, outflow winds tend to regenerate low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska as the wind flow, the cold air pulls out over the ocean. It rises when it's warm, pressures fall, and so you kind of get a default low sitting there. And the another one here tracking across the panhandle. So snow showers lingering into the afternoon over the northern panhandle, mostly clear down to the south, and precipitation advancing up towards southern Kodiak Island, but I don't think it'll make it on Wednesday. The front's still in another position. Actually, it's a new system coming in, kind of merges up. You can see a much stronger low now back out over the southwest Bering Sea, and winds 30, 50 miles an hour here with around that low center from the west-southwest over the western Aleutians. Mixed precipitation, rain showers, AKwx, Atka, rain into the Alaska Peninsula, Cold Bay area, and starting out snow, trending toward mixed rain and snow for the Pribilof Islands with gusty east-southeast winds. Otherwise, mostly clear interior Alaska, Gulf, Kodiak area, all the way up to the Arctic coast, continued well below zero, maybe a few flurries around Northway and Tok. And looking at the southeast coast, that whole low complex slowly shifting eastward, now just a weak trough over the Gulf of Alaska. And snow showers, mainly possibly northern panhandle, possibly a mix here over the southern areas with more of a west-southwest flow at the surface, but with any elevation at all, it's all going to be in the form of snow, and snow showers all the way to Stewart and Hyder. Otherwise, light winds with weak ridging, and also maybe a little bit of an increase in the winds here over the eastern Alaska range. See the gradient tightening up a little bit here. And that could also be the case for the Copper River Basin, maybe a little bit outflow wind through the Copper River Delta. And for lows tonight out in the Aleutians, mid-30s there, lower 20s for the Pribilofs, and 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, much colder, 20 to 25 below there, say northeast, the Bristol Bay area, and 35 to 50 below in the interior. Below zero again, Willow and the Sitna Valley could drop into that minus 30 to 35 degree range again, and below zero Kenai Peninsula. Single numbers to lower teens, North Gulf Coast. Panhandle, teens north, 20s south. Highs tomorrow Mid-20s to mid-30s there across the Panhandle, and staying below zero inland areas of southern Alaska, well below zero again for the interior, and a shade below for St. Lawrence Island, followed by lows for Wednesday morning. Call it 35 to 45 below, maybe down toward 50 below Yukon Flats, and again in the North Slope area with maybe a little bit milder, possibly there for the Arctic coastal areas, the -40s, looking at 35 to 40 below, and lows around 40 for Unalaska here. I almost thought I was on the highs, but yeah, that is the forecast low for there, and mid-30s Alaska Peninsula, teens to mid-20s for the Panhandle, and mid to upper 30s for the Aleutians. Followed by highs Wednesday afternoon, shaping up like this again, unable to crack 40 below there over the Yukon Flats and probably the North Slope as well. In other words, not much change from what we've seen. Same thing here, southern Alaska, anywhere highs 10 below to 5 above, milder out along the coast, lower to mid-teens there, and in the 20s for the southeast coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to first flying weather graphic here for Tuesday morning. Band of IFR stretched out across the southern Bering Sea here, sliding on into the eastern Aleutians. Associated with that weakening front, marginal VFR a ways north of that, and then the northern Bering through the Bering Strait, southwest coast, western interior. CC looking pretty good with VFR flying conditions in those locations. And central interior here looks, wrong hand, from the Kuskokwim Valley on up and around, more or less Alaska range into the, looks like the Fairbanks area and Nenana and possibly Healy there, marginal VFR. IFR starting out possible for northern Cook Inlet, actually central northern Cook Inlet, and a little more extensive area IFR here east or off the coast, and then extending inland over the northern Panhandle, VFR southern southeast coast. Afternoon, that kind of holds there with IFR from roughly Mount Edgecombe on up into across the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area, VFR to the south, IFR off the eastern North Gulf Coast, and VFR Copper River Basin. It looks like IFR here holding in northern central Cook Inlet, and then Kodiak Island, Kamishek Bay, and the Homer Seldovia area VFR. VFR back to the west, off the southwest coast here. This area IFR pushing eastward a little bit, comes across the Pribilofs and south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Pretty good in the interior. Some IFR just catching the central Arctic coast, and VFR for the Aleutians from Unmak Island all the way out to Shimiana too. And then for Wednesday, IFR back in the picture out that way with another system there spreading up into the Pribilofs and a band across the central Aleutians, marginal VFR from there eastward up to possibly, let's see, Port Heiden or so on the peninsula. VFR, southwest coast of Nunivak Island, northern Bering Sea VFR, right up in the Chukchi Sea, and possible IFR, central eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and the north side of the Alaska Range there, possibly Delta, more likely Northway and Tok in the marginal VFR zone there, and IFR off the eastern North Gulf Coast, but generally marginal for the Panhandle. Afternoon, got band IFR develops here over the central southeast coast, and Cook Inlet holding on to that IFR zone. Not very extensive, looks like it's right over the inlet itself. Otherwise, good VFR, all of the interior, possible IFR eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and pretty good band IFR here, almost across the Pribilofs, down into the Alaska Peninsula, breaking out the VFR behind that, and then more IFR central western Aleutians. Passes, Anituk and Adigan, both VFR tomorrow. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, looks pretty good for another VFR day for these passes, as well as rainy. Now, windy could start out marginal and then become VFR. And Isabel looks pretty marginal throughout the day, possible IFR early in the morning, but looks like marginal VFR into the early evening. And for Mentasta, VFR, and Tanita, VFR, and Portage, generally VFR. Could be low stuff either side briefly tomorrow morning at times, but generally looks pretty good. And Chilkoot and White, IFR. With the freezing levels here, again, 2,000 feet south of the Queen Charlotte's at the surface there, from Dixon Entrance up across Sitka, up along the coastline, dropping still south of Kodiak. Now a little farther to the north again, up to the Alaska Peninsula, north of all the Aleutians now, but still south of the Pribilofs. And for the icing threat with that system, weakening front coming eastward and a little to the north, could be some local areas of considerable moderate, but that's going to be out over the ocean there. Otherwise, the Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, just occasional light rime icing possible. Southeast northern panhandle, just a slight chance of some mixed icing there on the light side above 4,000 feet. Jet stream, upper level low kind of hung up here over southern Alaska and the flow to the south of that, and 9,000 feet, same thing, low pressure, Susitna Valley. Another one out here near the Pribilofs, and southwest flow 25 to 30 knots. Northeasterlies, east-northeast, 15 to, well, maybe up to 25, generally 5 to 15, the exception being there on the western Arctic coast. And then at 3,000 feet southwest, 25 across the eastern Aleutians. Easterly flow 10 to 20 at the most, lighter here, 15 variable over southern Alaska. And turbulence shaping up like this, not too bad. Occasional light to isolated moderate chop out in the Aleutians, possibly the Pribilofs.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from Dehne and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by AKwx to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and Dehne's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that that would be easier to travel with, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state. Which
you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy, and it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer. Computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these two-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. You know, we're from the Great Plains, where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned the it's like flypaper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, continuing to advance south and southwest here with very cold temperatures, and looks like St. Matthew Island getting pretty close here to the outer edge, and expected more of with the winds becoming more easterly, expect more of a westward movement here over the next 5 days. And as the winds become a little stronger, we could see shore-fast ice breaking off here and moving west with it, breaking off the coast, opening some polynyas up, and that could happen anywhere along the west coast. Anyway, for coastal water forecasts, west-northwest, 20 knots for the south coast seas, 8 feet there, so small craft advisories, west 20 knots with 9-foot seas. Up on the north coast, inside waters, northern and central, southeast 15 seas, 3 feet, Clarence Strait northwest at 15 with 3-foot seas. Moving on to Wednesday, southeast winds, Clarence Strait about 10 knots, Stevens Passage 20 knots. Small craft advisories, Lynn Canal, northerlies back at about 25 knots. Otherwise, south winds at 15 for the south coast, seas 8 feet, and west winds on the north coast, 15 become east at 20 on the extreme north coast with 8-foot seas. Cook Inlet, north of the Forelands tomorrow, northeast at 10, seas 2 feet, south of Forelands, north 15, and then small craft advisories, northwest 25 knots with 9-foot seas for Kamishak Bay, Barren Islands, northwest 20, back up to 25 knots for the western North Gulf Coast, and then back down to 20 for the east side, and northwest at 15 for Prince William Sound. Those become northerly and increase to sustained values at 25 knots, so definitely higher gusts here out of northern bays like Potato Point, and seas at about 6 feet. North winds 25 knots for the North Gulf Coast, and northwest 25, Barren Islands. Small craft advisories continue for Kamishak Bay, north 25, and 20 knots south of the Forelands, northern Cook Inlet, light breeze at 10. And for Bristol Bay tomorrow, northeast at 10 knots, east-southeast 20 knots here for the Alaska Peninsula. Seas 5 to as high as 10 feet in the Pacific side. Kind of a laid down area here from Castle Cape on up toward AKwx, northwest at 10 and west-northwest 15 for Kodiak Island. And for Wednesday, north to northeast at about 20 for Kodiak Island and the surrounding marine areas, east 20 knots here, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, southeast 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, seas 8 to 11 feet, and northeast 30 knots for Bristol Bay. And for the western Aleutians, east winds 30 knots tomorrow, and then on average, southerly winds at 20 for the Adak-Atka area, and southeast 20 to 25 knots for Unalaska Island, and more of a south-southwest direction for the area toward Nikolsky. And for Wednesday, 30 to as high as 35 knot winds here, especially for Unalaska Island, so it could be some minimum gales with seas 9 to 14 feet. Small craft advisory central Aleutian southerlies 25 to 30. Out west, southeast winds at 30 turn easterly from Kiska to Shimya, so gale warnings there in the afternoon, seas building 17 feet. Southwest coast, northeast 20, 25 knots, east 30 knots for the Pribilof. Small craft advisories for St. Matthew Island, east at 25 and east 15, St. Lawrence Island. Outlook, those winds come up there for St. Lawrence Island at 25 knots for brisk wind advisories all the way down to Nunivak Island along the Yukon Delta coast. Full gales there in the northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island east at 40, and the Pribilof southeast 30 knots and east 30 knots along the Kuskokwim Delta coast. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west winds at about 15 knots. Tomorrow could be a little stronger early on, but not much. And then west at 10 on the central coast, variable to east here on the west side, especially from Point Lay, it'll be east at 10, then southeast winds from Wales to Cape Beaufort. And then for Wednesday, south to southeast winds Wales to Cape Beaufort here, and then southeast for the western and central coast, 5 to 15 knot westerlies for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight, clear and cold up that way, and maybe a few flurries along the Alaska Range, possibly eastern Copper River Basin, but winter storm warning out for the northern Panhandle, Pelican, Juneau, Douglas, Gustavus, for 5 to 10 inches of snow by 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Dry down to the south, more influence of high pressure there, and this front pushing milder temperatures, mixture of precipitation eastward, and that kind of holds up, and then another storm comes rolling in on Wednesday for stronger winds.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.